You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, 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 other than day one.
Donald Trump has successfully moved the Overton window in a way that is as dangerous for the future of democracy in this country as anything else.
This is what Vout and Project 2025 wanted.
He's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great.
They control the Congress, they control the White House, and they control the courts. And so, of course, they're massively overreaching. And yes, they are getting away with it right now.
This is clearly a man who cannot tolerate criticism of him or what he does, which is exactly what authoritarianism is all about.
The New York Times is just as fake as CNN and MSDNC. They really are the enemy of the people.
What he is saying, rather bluntly, if you stand up to Donald Trump, he will punish you.
Protesters in Philadelphia, state capitals in California, Minnesota, Michigan, Texas, Wisconsin, Indiana, and others showed up to oppose Trump, Musk, and Project 2025.
The US and President Trump has overseen America's largest military parade in decades as nationwide protests take place against his leadership.
Demonstrations are happening right across the United States today to oppose the Trump administration.
Two visions of America. On a day the country's deepening divide was there for all the world to see.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf, and you're watching Logically Left right here, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all the usual places. Oh, it looks like I forgot to fix my camera from the last place that I used it at. All right, so, hey, I'm over here now. Okay, anyway, I know, weird way to start the show, especially when we have such very sobering and very important things to talk about, including the person that may have ended the life of Charlie Kirk. And so they have someone in custody now, and I've got some of the details on that, but I am also going to talk about the FBI dropping the ball, okay? And why that is the case. Because there was a lot of big, gigantic F-ups before landing on this person identified as Tyler Robinson, who apparently was not apprehended by the FBI, but was actually turned in. So there's that. We've got that. I'm going to talk about that, of course, the manhunt and that failure. We also have some Republicans are urging Trump to cool it on blaming the left for what had happened. And so, you know, we've got that, the response here from some Republicans. We have Trump on Fox and Friends talking about he doesn't really care about fixing the country, and even went on to defend right-wing extremists. So there's that. We've got ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Two Democratic politicians who just returned from the region are like, oh my God, there is ethnic cleansing, and we are complicit in it. Very important revelation there. You know, actually having Democrats admit that the United States has been funding ethnic cleansing, and I would also add genocide. And then Brazil not only convicted, but sentenced their coup plotter to prison. Whisper of a dream, right? What could have been? So I'm gonna be talking about that as well. So yes, it is a bit early today, but I got, look, man, the way that I do that I produce the show is I'm pretty much running up to the wire. Okay, up to the wire. And so, like, it's, you know, like 1:50 Eastern time, and I'm still like furiously creating stuff for the show. So that didn't happen today. I don't know what happened. I started late because I woke up late, and I started producing late, and somehow I got done early. How does that happen? I don't know. It's weird, but I'm gonna go with it. Okay, so we can get these stories out there, because that's important. Okay. And by the way, when I say I got up late, I was like, oh man, I got up at 8. Oh God, that is super late for me. And then immediately got to work. So it's like that's kind of how my day goes. But anyway, um, look, before I get into it, please like and share. Okay, very important that you do so. Um, it helps out greatly. Audience interest, audience participation, all that stuff. Really, really, really does help. So please do that. Also consider becoming a supporter of the show. Patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Also, make sure that your YouTube is not on restricted mode. Okay, I talked about that in a video not too long ago. How hey they're gonna do AI to turn on restricted mode, on your YouTube. So make sure hey if you're an adult and you might be into a little bit of anime or whatever, right? Watching some kid shows and the AI thinks that you're a kid, it's going to turn on restricted mode. So, and then of course that's going to block any and all political content. And so if you haven't already, go and change that back if that has happened to you. Okay. So that is something that is a warning that needs to be out there. Okay, so just to make sure that you can get all the political content that you enjoy. I don't even know if "enjoy" is the right word, honestly, because I don't think any of us is really enjoying any of this that's happening now. I enjoyed when I was kind of dunking on right wingers. Oh, you guy says something dumb and stupid and blah 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 and whatever, and promoting things like Medicare for all. But we're not having fun anymore. Okay, we ain't having no fun. Not in this country anymore. But anyway, let's get to the stories. Let's talk about the FBI's little problem. Okay. Despite the fact that they now have a suspect in custody in the shocking murder of podcaster and Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, the FBI has absolutely bungled their manhunt. It was about 3 days after the event in which Charlie Kirk was unfortunately murdered, because I don't like murder. Okay. While he was having a discussion and answering a question on gun violence, which is, look, I'm going to ask, would it be too disrespectful to point out that is very ironic? It is a horrible kind of irony. There's not a whole lot of good irony going on here, but there is irony. Okay. And look, I make no mistake, I am against political assassinations. Okay. I think it's a terrible thing that happened. The lots of political violence that has been happening lately shouldn't happen to anybody. And I hope that whoever the shooter turns out to be, and again, they have someone in custody, but we don't know if that person is 100% the shooter or not. We're going to have to give them due process, of course. But they're going to get punished for what they did. Allegedly. Okay. So now, political violence is unacceptable to me, and in any form. Okay. Whether it be through policy, that's important, policy, or through physical violence. So I'm being very clear. But anyway, the FBI had a very difficult time tracking this person down. Okay. And you had FBI Director Kash Patel making some pretty embarrassing blunders. I mean, he had announced that we got him. Yes, we got this person. Oh, it turns out we didn't. Wait, what are you talking about? He announced on social media that the subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. He said that after just a couple of hours after Kirk's murder. A couple of hours after that, he's like, oops, it turns out, no, the subject, free to go. Now, that particular person was an older gentleman who had absolutely nothing to do with this shooting. There was another person of interest that was taken in custody, then released after questioning. And so, finally, we do have somebody in custody. Someone that goes by the name of Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old from Utah, Southwest Utah. And so this person was actually allegedly turned in by a family member. So nothing really to do with the FBI or their investigation. So now a lot of people, as a result of the FBI's blunders, were calling them out. And this is not, these are not left-wingers that are calling out the FBI. This is Joe Biggs, for example, is a Proud Boys leader who had helped lead the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Okay. He asked why the FBI was engaging in quote-unquote speculation instead of putting out authoritative information. He said this, quote, "Stop all this clickbait crap you keep doing. It's unbecoming of the office in which you represent and only proves that you were a horrible pick for this position." Wow, that's something that I can agree on, although we could probably disagree on the reasoning that he would believe so. I believe that Kash Patel is not suited for this position because he's a political hire. That's really it. Hired because he is loyal to Donald Trump. I'm going to guess here, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being unfair about this whole thing, but I'm assuming that Joe Biggs is not in favor of Kash Patel because he's Indian. His race has nothing to do with whether or not he's qualified for this position. It's his experience and his temperament, of which Kash Patel has zero experience, zero temperament. And so, and again, is nothing more than a Trump political hire. Okay, so that's what that is. But anyway, Kyle Seraphin, a right-wing former FBI agent, and by the way, a lot of FBI agents are conservative. A lot of law enforcement are conservative. But that didn't stop a lot of these FBI agents from, for example, doing their job investigating January 6th Donald Trump. And so let's be very, very clear about that. Just because somebody is conservative doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be in fealty to Donald Trump or not do their jobs, as we've seen with a lot of FBI or law enforcement officials prior to the Trump purges. So here's what Seraphin said. FBI director effed up and is desperate for a win. This is absolutely ridiculous. There you go. It was amateur hour, said Dick Durbin, who is a Democrat, the top Democrat in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which oversees Justice Department. He was doing a running commentary. Historically, the FBI keeps its mouth closed until it believes it's the right time and the right message. Yes. Again, Kash Patel, not a law enforcement official, he was a podcaster. But once he got appointed to that position and confirmed by Republicans, he fired the people who knew what they were doing because they were not loyal to Donald Trump. Not only that, but Pam Bondi moved a lot of FBI agents over to immigration enforcement. Okay, so understand that this is what happens. This incompetence is what happens when you fire the people who generally know how to do their jobs and you replace them with political hires. Okay. And look, on Wednesday, 3 former senior FBI officials sued Patel and the FBI for doing just that, for firing them on political reasons, which included their work on prosecuting January 6 rioters. That lawsuit went into detail about how Patel commissioned an especially large challenge coin to give subordinates inscribed with Kash Patel. Okay. Yes, I get it. A little money sign in there. and how he had an extensive whiskey and cigar collection in his office. Okay, Patel not only acted unlawfully, but deliberately chose to prioritize politicizing the FBI over protecting the American people, said former FBI officials Brian Driscoll, Stephen Jensen, and Spencer Evans in their complaint against Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi. Yes. They also accused Patel of having degraded the country's national security by firing 3 of the FBI's most experienced operational leaders, each of them experts in preventing terrorism and reducing violent crime. Again, this is what happens when you fire experts and replace them with political appointees. Everyone wants the person who, alleged to have killed Charlie Kirk to face justice. That's how, that's how the law is supposed to work. You break it, there should be justice, right? There should be justice. And so that's the thing. Now, look, I think that this shooting was, I do think that there is, yes, they have political motives, okay? They do have political motives, okay? And so, I mean, that's just me. But, I don't know for sure. What we do know is that this person did become political, according to a family member, and said, I don't like Charlie Kirk or his messages. Okay. There were messages found on bullet casings at the scene, including, hey, fascist catch. And if you read this, you're gay. Okay. All right. Still no motive, though. All right. But hey, he's also unaffiliated with any political party, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a political motive, even if you're not affiliated with any political party, to be fair. So, I mean, look, here's the thing. Yes, people want justice. Okay. People do want justice. I want justice. I don't want revenge. I didn't like Charlie Kirk at all, but that doesn't mean I wanted the man dead. Okay. I'm just saying, nobody should want that. Nobody should want their political opponents to be murdered. Okay. Again, as much as I vehemently disagree with a lot, or just about everything that Charlie Kirk stood for, he was a human being, and that's something to remember. Okay. And so, but anyway, back to Kash Patel. According to the facts on the ground, the current head of the FBI is just in over his head. And that's bad for everyone. All right. Especially people like Kirk's family. All right. Look, more than anyone, they do deserve justice for what happened. Again, there's people who cared about him, people who loved him. I still don't personally see why, but that's not for me to judge. That's not for me to judge. All right. And so they deserve justice. Period. That's it. And so, look, at the end of the day, right, they have someone, we still don't know exactly, if, and this has to go to trial, if this person actually committed this crime. Okay. And so I think it's important, though, that we note that Kash Patel and the FBI absolutely dropped the ball on this one. Okay. And it's because they have blatantly politicized parts of these parts of the government. You can't really trust law enforcement anymore. I mean, again, not only have they politicized this, but it has led to absolute rank incompetence. And so now any faith that anyone has in the government has been completely undermined, because again, if they could not keep someone as high profile as Charlie Kirk safe, I mean, what hope does anyone else have? Okay. We've got more, and that's Republicans that have responded to Donald Trump on this. All right. Following the shocking murder of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, President Donald Trump immediately went on to blame the left for the slaying, despite no evidence, no motive, and no suspect that was in custody at the time.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country. From the attack on my life in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, which killed a husband and father, to the attacks on ICE agents, to the vicious murder of a healthcare executive in the streets of New York, to the shooting of House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and 3 others, radical left political violence has hurt too many innocent people and taken too many lives.
Radical left political violence. Wow. And again, this was before there was even anyone in custody, and we still do not know, even though we do have someone in custody now, about the motivations of this shooter who, so far as we know, was politically unaffiliated. Okay? But, we do know, by the way, that the Butler shooter that allegedly took shots at Donald Trump was a registered Republican. I'm not saying that the left has never done any political violence whatsoever, but I do think it needs to be pointed out very explicitly that the far right has been responsible for the majority of the political violence in recent decades. I mean, if you take a look, okay, you have all of these lethal political assassinations within the last 20 years. All right wing. All right wing. I mean, that's the reality here. That is the reality. Okay. By the way, I think a lot of you have noticed that Trump had conveniently skipped over, for example, the murder of Democrats Melissa Hortman and her husband by a Trump supporter. He also skipped over the politically motivated assault perpetrated against Paul Pelosi. Okay. Look, what Trump said right there is not doing anything to bring the American people together. He's actually further driving people apart and trying to instigate more political violence against the left. I mean, on Thursday, just to, point out how explicit he wants violence against the left, he said, quote, to reporters, "We just have to beat the hell out of radical left lunatics." That's pretty clear, all right? And so it is not an accident here that we have seen a huge upswing in political violence since 2015. It's, again, a result of not only Trump's rhetoric. Oh, no, he's not the only one. There's a lot to blame here, all right? But, for example, after Charlie Kirk was murdered, here's Representative Bob Onder calling the left, the ideology, pure evil.
Well, what for us? Well, everything has changed. If we didn't know it already, there is no longer any middle ground. Some of the American left are undoubtedly well-meaning people, but their ideology is pure evil. They hate the good, the truth, and the beautiful, and embrace the evil, the false, and the ugly. And they literally will kill those with whom they disagree, just as their predecessor, leftist Marx and Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot and Fidel Castro did. We must know that.
Who did Marx kill? Okay, I don't think Marx killed anybody. Okay, but anyway, look, ideology of evil, he says. Ideology of evil. You know what the modern American left wants? Healthcare. Healthcare, please. We just want healthcare, civil rights for LGBTQ people, higher wages for workers. Nobody dies from those things. In fact, when you do those things, you actually save people's lives. When you give people healthcare, you save their lives. So the response here from Donald Trump and Representative Onder is absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And there's more examples, by the way. But first, let me get to the Republicans that are pushing back. Yeah. Representative Thomas Massie, for example, said, hey, Trump, you tone this down. All right, tone down your rhetoric. He said, I mean, there is a lot of rhetoric, and the president himself engages in it. He called it a hostile act, for example, to co-sponsor the Epstein resolution. Don't forget, Epstein files, right? So I think that's ridiculous rhetoric. Now, Senator Tom Tillis told the National Journal that he was really disgusted by some of the conservatives who are using Charlie Kirk's death to say that we are at war with the Democrats to bolster support, calling it a cheap, disgusting, awful way to pretend like you're a leader of a conservative movement. He said there are two in particular that I found particularly disgusting. What he's referring to, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, take your pick, right? For example, Libs of TikTok, they posted this. This is war. You also had Steve Bannon talking about that. Representative Nancy Mace claimed that the left owns what happened. Okay. Elon Musk over on X said the left is the party of murder. Oh, okay. James Woods wrote, it's not gun violence, it's Democrat violence. Remember, the shooter's unaffiliated, the alleged shooter. Benny Johnson wrote, Charlie Kirk is now a martyr. May this be a turning point for America. So, look, calling Charlie Kirk a martyr, I think, is wrong, okay? Kirk, at the end of the day, and I know this may sound disparaging, right? But he was just a billionaire mouthpiece. I mean, that's really all he was. I'm not saying he wasn't talented, obviously, at what he did. He was good at what he did, which is why he rose in the conservative sphere. But when it comes to his messaging, it wasn't exactly unique. And so for the billionaires that funded him, pretty easily replaceable. So, but look, a lot of people, by the way, are really comparing him, and I think this is a good, apt comparison. They were comparing him to Horst Wessel, who was a member of the Nazi Party, who was murdered by communists. He was murdered by communists and was used by the Nazi Party as a rallying point for that movement. They even made their, anthem, the Horst Wessel anthem. Okay. And so, look, I'm starting to see a little bit of that play out here in the reactions to Charlie Kirk, especially calling him a martyr. That's not good for anyone. Okay. And so, yes, I think there is some, parallels here. But anyway, there was another conservative that spoke out, and it's retiring Representative Don Bacon, who told NBC News that he wished Trump would focus on trying to unite the country. He also said that, well, Trump won't because Trump's a populist, and populists dwell on anger. Well, I have to remind people, we had Democrats killed in Minnesota too, right? Yes. Yes, we did. It's Melissa Horst and her husband that were killed by a Trump supporter, Trump voter. So, look, political violence is affecting both sides here. And pretending that it's not puts more people in danger. But again, the majority of the political violence has been perpetrated by the right wing, and those are facts. And I'm sorry if those trigger you, but that's just a reality. That's the reality. And so this shooter, again, being unaffiliated, but possibly if they had some left-wing views, it still wouldn't change the fact that the majority of the political violence is on the right. And I know the ADL is a bit of a dubious source these days, but their work on right-wing violence and cataloging it over the years is still, it holds true. They are responsible for the majority of extremist murders. That's just the reality here. And it's not because I believe that conservatives are naturally violent people. That's not what I'm saying. I know plenty of conservatives who would not do anything like this. But there is a violent movement within the far right that is propped up consistently by disinformation, which propagates on social media. Okay? And as a result of that propaganda and the politics of division are becoming more and more radicalized and more prone to violence. Now, for me, I just hope that enough people on the right listen to these Republicans who are trying to cool things down. They ain't going to listen to Democrats, but maybe they'll listen to Republicans. And trying to cool things down and to try to be a voice of reason. Okay. Moving on. Oh boy. President Donald Trump openly admitted that he couldn't care less about, extremists on the right wing when he was asked by Fox and Friends co-host Ainsley Earhart about how to fix the country. How to fix the country and stop radical extremists from both sides.
What do we do about our country with that? Because we have radicals on the right as well. We have radicals on the left. People are watching all of these videos and cheering. Some people are cheering that Charlie was killed. How do we fix this country? How do we come back together?
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime.
Worried about the border.
They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping centers. We don't want you shooting our people in the middle of the street. The radicals on the left are the problem. And they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy. Although they want men and women sports, they want transgender for everyone, they want open borders.
Well, okay, hold on. Transgender for everybody. Where was that? Where was that? Okay, no, it's a complete and utter lie. Look, I couldn't care less. Oh, I couldn't care less about fixing, right-wing radicals. You know why? Because the right-wing radicals, well, they're radical for a reason, and so I actually agree with them. Oh, okay. So you're defending right-wing extremism and then demonizing the left. Wonderful. This is what the president of the United States is doing. Okay. Well, they want open borders. The worst thing to ever happen to this country. No, I would say that we were looking at the worst thing to happen to this country. At least lately. Okay. What does it mean? Transgender for everyone. I have no idea. Okay. Nobody has any idea. Nobody. But look, here's the thing. Are some people cheering on the death of Charlie Kirk? Yeah. Some people are on social media. That's true. I don't necessarily agree with that. Of course, small group of people. There are others that are just like, I don't have any empathy for him or what happened. All right. That said, the majority of people on the left have openly denounced this political violence. But you don't see that much on the right wing. At least I haven't been. Melissa Hortman, for example, was killed by a MAGA supporter and had a list of 45 Democrats that they were targeting. And so, but, you know, you don't really hear a whole lot about that. I mean, Trump said, oh, yeah, no, I will denounce that, but then refused to call Governor Tim Walz. Okay, so, you know, well, why would I want to talk to him? Because he's the governor of a state where there's a tragedy, a politically motivated murder. You're not going to call him? Nope. And look, Trump is also lowering the flag to half-mast, okay, for Charlie Kirk. Didn't do so for Melissa Hortman, sorry. And it didn't mention her or her husband. And worst of all, he is defending right-wing extremists. Oh, they only care about our country. Really? Look, his response, though, shouldn't be a surprise. All right? Shouldn't be. I mean, he did pardon the Capitol rioters, and he stood by accused murderers, Kyle Rittenhouse and Daniel Penny. In fact, pretty much every right-wing person that has attacked another person, he has came out to either defend or just hasn't really talked about it. He also previously defended attendees of the 2021 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, which was organized by neo-Nazis, and then had blamed the violence that had happened on the left. But again, it is not the left that is violent. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, between 1975 and September of 2025, individuals motivated by right-wing ideology like white supremacy, incels, anti-abortion beliefs, they committed 391 murders. It's according to the right-wing Cato Institute. Yeah. Comparatively, people motivated by left-wing ideology were responsible for about 65 deaths. And look, there was another shooting in Colorado where a 16-year-old that was motivated by anti-Semitic and white supremacist social media content had allegedly shot 2 of his classmates. So, I mean, that's right-wing right there, motivated by right-wing ideologies. Okay? So, I don't know, it seems like to me that Donald Trump pretty much wants an all-out war on his political enemies and is giving far-right radicals the go-ahead to do more violence. And it's not like they haven't already done violence. Look, we are living in currently a very dangerous time in history. And I fear that it's only going to get worse. And so all I can say is, buckle up. Okay. Moving on. Switching gears, because I can't talk about Charlie Kirk all day. All right. Two Democratic senators have reached what they called an inescapable conclusion that the country of Israel is ethnically cleansing Palestinians from Gaza and that the United States is complicit. So both Chris Van Hollen of Maryland and Jeff Merkley of Oregon, who are members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, came to this conclusion after coming home from a trip to Egypt, Israel, the occupied West Bank, and Jordan. In their report, they noted that the destruction in the area goes beyond just using bombs and bullets, but that there is a systemic campaign to strangle humanitarian aid, which they are calling using food as a weapon of war. The Netanyahu government has gone far beyond targeting Hamas to imposing collective punishment on all the people of Gaza, Van Hollen said at the Thursday press conference. What they're doing and what we witnessed is putting those goals into action. At least 100 people have died from the famine in Gaza, the United Nations said this week, citing the Gaza Health Ministry. Senators argued that Israel's actions in Gaza constitute a deliberate strategy to ethnically cleanse the local population rather than collateral damage from the war against Hamas. During their visit to the Egypt-Gaza border, they observed Rafah, for example, right? That was the southern Gaza city who was once home to 270,000 Palestinians. Rafah has been reduced to rubble, okay? And so, I mean, that right there, that's a huge problem. A huge problem, okay? And just an absolute humanitarian disaster and an example of Israel targeting civilian infrastructure. Now, the lawmakers also met with former Israel Defense Force soldiers who described participating in, quote, the systemic destruction of civilian infrastructure. The report noted firsthand accounts of how this was part of an intentional pattern of using explosives to destroy up to whole city blocks, houses, schools, and other civilian sites, like hospitals, for example. Okay. Now, they also documented arbitrary restrictions that have left aid groups unable to predict what will be denied entry. Jordanian officials, for example, told them that peanut butter, honey, and dates were suddenly banned from convoys, from food convoys. So you had entire trucks that were turned away for carrying a single restricted item. Each truck, the report said, is subject to $400 customs processing fees, and when they are not able to make it out through the screening process, that $400 has to be paid again to join a later convoy. Because of those and other restrictions by the Israeli government, humanitarian aid coming in from Jordan is currently operating under the 10% capacity of its capacity, according to the report. Not only that, but the report noted that the UN's fleet of trucks have sustained severe damage, with United Nations organization showing senators video of convoys coming under fire from, not from Hamas, but the IDF. Something they describe as a regular occurrence. So you have Israeli troops attacking food aid convoys on the regular. The regular. Now, the senators also toured a warehouse run by the Egyptian Red Crescent and the UN World Food Program with goods that have been banned by Israel. They are things like water pumps, tents, wheelchairs, and even spare parts for vehicles under something called dual-use restrictions. The Israeli port of Ashdod, WFP officials told the senators that about 2,200 shipping containers of food, enough to feed everyone in Gaza for about 3 weeks, sat delayed and rotting by screening procedures requiring each pallet to be checked individually. Markey described the strategies to components: one, to destroy homes so that they cannot be returned to. That second strategy is then to deprive Palestinians of essentials to live, like food, water, and medicine. Yes, to try to get them to not return so that Israel can go and take their land. That's really it. Now, Israel also replaced the UN's hundreds of distribution sites with just 4 aid points for 2 million people, 3 located only in southern Gaza. The senators heard accounts from malnourished mothers unable to walk miles to distribution sites while carrying their kids, and then lifting 40-pound food boxes for the return journey. From May 22nd to July 31st, 1,373 people were killed in the vicinity of these aid sites, according to the UN, and that's because you had Israeli soldiers that were targeting those people. The report reads, that Israel and the United States are calling plans for the mass displacement of Palestinians in Gaza a voluntary exodus is one of the most fraudulent, sinister, and twisted cover stories ever told. There is nothing voluntary about wanting to depart when your home is gone, when your agricultural fields are no longer accessible, said Van Hollen at a press conference. Exactly. Exactly. This right here is what we've been talking about for a long time. This has gone so far beyond October 7th. Okay, it's not about the hostages. It's never been about the hostages. It's not even about Hamas. It is about getting rid of all the Palestinians so they can come in and steal the land. That's the reality of it. This is why it is ethnic cleansing. And finally, some of the elected Democrats are openly admitting it. We could have used this energy during the Biden administration, okay? And admitting that, yes, the United States has been helping with this by sending money and weapons to Israel. And they have used that money and those weapons to perform these atrocities. This is what Joe Biden was doing. Okay, this is what Joe Biden was doing, and now what Trump is still doing. Okay, both parties, let me understand, this is not a, Republican versus Democrat thing, right? Both parties have been complicit in this. Both parties. Every time they voted to send money and weapons to Israel, innocent people die. That's what happens. That's what happens. And so, yes, it is the fault of both sides in this. And I don't normally like to play the both sides game, but in this case, it absolutely applies. Both sides have been too beholden to the right-wing government of Israel and have been sending them weapons and money that they have been using to do ethnic cleansing. It has to stop, and it has to stop now. Okay. All right. Ooh, fan message. Fan message. Okay. You left-wing bigoted F, where is your condemnation of Charlie Kirk's murder? Or do you assent to the violence your rhetoric encourages? Dude missed every single thing I have said the entire... In all three stories, on all three stories, this person over his head. Bro is so goddamn blind. Rewind and watch the whole part. All of that. All of it. Especially the fact that, or the points where, I talk about how it is actually the right wing that is doing violence and violent rhetoric. The whooshiest of all whooshes. Exactly. It would be, it's funny how people just completely miss all of that. Just, hear whatever they want to hear, and believe whatever they want to believe, despite the fact that the reality is completely different. Okay? This person does not live in reality, never has, never will. Well, okay, maybe they could. Maybe they could break out of it, but that would require a desire to do so, and to accept reality. And that's kind of hard. Yeah, the rhetoric is right-wing. Exactly. Okay. So, just insanity. Absolute insanity. Okay. Let's see. One more story here. Brazil's former president and coup plotter has been sentenced to 27 years in prison. Thursday, a panel of 5 Supreme Court justices voted 4-1 to convict Jair Bolsonaro and his 7 associates of plotting a military coup and assassination of current President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Not only that, but targets were Vice President Geraldo Alckmin, Justice Carmen Lucia Rocha, Justices Flavio Dino, Cristiano Zanin, and Alexandre de Moraes. So, hopefully I got that right. Words are hard. The defendants, who in addition to Bolsonaro include some army generals, former defense ministers, Walter Braga Neto, and Paulo Sergio Nogueira de Oliveira, former institutional secretary minister Augusto Heleno Ribeiro, admiral and former Navy commander Almir Garnier Santos. All right. So now you also had former Justice Minister Anderson Torres and former presidential advisor Marcio Morando were found guilty of crimes, including attempting a coup, involvement in an armed criminal organization, attempting the violent abolition of democratic rule of law, and aggravated damage of state asset. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Mauro Cid, a former Bolsonaro aide who turned a state witness, was sentenced as well, but he got about 2 years of confinement under open conditions, which is a pretty light sentence, considering. Now, the government, according to Moraes, said ahead of his vote on Tuesday, the government wanted to remain in power by simply ignoring democracy, and this is what constitutes a coup d'etat. The leader of the criminal group made it clear publicly and in his own words that he would never accept defeat at the ballot, a democratic loss in the elections, and that he would never abide by the will of the people. Bolsonaro, who is currently under house arrest, denies any wrongdoing, still denies it, and he's like, fake news, political persecution. Boy, does that sound familiar. Now, he is also banned from running for any office until 2030 due to his abuses of power related to the baseless claims of election fraud. One of the justices who voted to convict spoke about the massive amount of evidence that they had against Bolsonaro. The case files show a coordinated criminal enterprise by the defendants who adopted the methods of a digital militia to attack the judiciary, the electoral system, and the electronic voting machines. God, that's so familiar. Wow, does that sound familiar? Jeez. I mean, yes, he claimed election fraud, which fueled the lies and conspiracy theories that led to the January 8th, 2023 mob that attacked government buildings. Again, so many familiarities. Look around and get this, 1,500 Bolsonaro supporters were arrested in the days following the storming of Congress and the presidential offices. Wow. I mean, look, it's kind of crazy. Okay? Kind of crazy how alike these situations really were. But there is one major difference, and that is how Brazil treated their coup plotters and actually tried to hold them accountable, while our coup plotters and insurrectionists were pardoned. Hell, the ringleader was reelected. Now, speaking of the regime here, right? Trump is not thrilled with this, okay? Trump and his administration, Marco Rubio, calling this a witch hunt. Look, they slapped a 50% tariff on Brazil, okay? Which they don't pay, we pay. That's a tax on us. So I am an avid coffee drinker, and I am not happy about this, all right? I am not happy about the Trump regime sticking up for a coup plotter by making my coffee more expensive. I mean, that's ridiculous. And look, here's the thing. The justice system actually held their criminals accountable in Brazil. Ours did not. Now, you have Brazilian Secretary of Institutional Affairs, Gleisi Hoffmann, who declared on social media that the conviction of Jair Bolsonaro and his accomplices by the federal Supreme Court expresses the vigor of democracy and national sovereignty. They were convicted in due legal process based on compelling evidence of the crimes they committed. It is a historic, unprecedented decision so that they may never again dare to attack the rule of law and the will of the people expressed at the ballot box. It is also the proud response of Brazil's judiciary to the economic sanctions and absurd coercion of the Donald Trump government in conspiracy with the traitors to the homeland in the service of Bolsonaro. Today, Brazil told the world that the crimes against democracy are intolerable and that they are unforgivable. Well, you know, you got to say one thing about Donald Trump getting back into power. The rest of the world is kind of showing you that, hey, you know, maybe or it shows the rest of the world that you can't be soft on people who tried to overturn democracy. Okay? And so, you know, that everybody else kind of got a wake-up call on that one. Like, oh my God. Oh, they let that happen? After January 6th? They let that guy back into power? Oh, crap. Yeah, we're going to have to do something about that. Brazil has led the way, but you also have South Korea. And so, and look, all across the government now, or I'm sorry, all across the world, we have governments now that are not only tracking or taking the threat of right-wing authoritarianism seriously, but are also, in some cases, like, for example, Mexico, embracing a little bit of left-wing populism, like lifting people out of poverty. They're doing left-wing policies now. And look, it's not like they weren't doing it before. I mean, between 2018 and 2024, for example, under AMLO, Mexico, they went after poverty pretty aggressively, and the poverty rate went from 42% to 29.6, almost 30%. So they still have a long way to go, but that's pretty good. You got President Sheinbaum, who is now commanding an over 70% approval rating for tackling poverty. Weird how that works. So, yeah, what happens when you go left and actually try to do things to help working people? So, look, there are some upsides, okay, from the United States' massive orange-colored smear. All right, I mean, seriously. But that said, getting back to Brazil here, Federal Deputy Benita da Silva said on social media that Democratic Brazil is proud and celebrating the firm decision of the High Court, whose members suffered countless threats, including death threats, from the conspirators against the democratic rule of law. Referring to the, of course, the United States, da Silva praised the justices who, quote, did not bow to the threats to our sovereignty from the greatest external power. Now we have to defeat the amnesty coup of the convicted plotters that they are still trying to pass. She added in reference to efforts by members of the right-wing Congress still trying to pass clemency legislation for Bolsonaro. She said, no amnesty. No amnesty. So, you know, we still have to see how that turns out. But look, I mean, here's the thing. This really shows you what could have happened had we in the United States actually done something about our coup plotters. But unfortunately, that is not what happened. And so now we're stuck, for now, in a very bad situation. And so there you are. Honestly, this makes me feel better about our situation. At the very least, we could be a motivator for the rest of the world on what to avoid, showing them to act before it's too late. Yes, if it could happen here, it can happen anywhere. Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of a strange thing being the example to the world of what not to do. Okay, but I mean, at least we could provide a service. At least. Okay. Tariffs are regressive taxes. Absolutely, they are. Coffee prices are up. That's horrible. I know. like I said, yikes. I do not look forward to going to the grocery store on that. Biden being bad doesn't make Trump good and vice versa. Yeah, well, no, yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, one was far worse than the other. And so, but you got to point out, like, and be accurate about it. Biden did some pretty bad things. Did he do some good things? Yes. But he did some pretty bad things in his steadfast support of what's going on in Israel and, the ethnic cleansing and refusing to actually enforce, for example, any of his red lines, right? Oh, don't go into Rafah. And they flattened Rafah. Okay. And Joe Biden did absolutely nothing about it. The Democrats did absolutely nothing about it. And so, I mean, that's really bad. That's absolutely really bad. And should be called out for what it is. And again, it is not to say that Trump is better. No, he's letting this continue and continuing to fund it. But again, that's why on this issue, both of them are terrible. But anyway, silver linings. Yep, absolutely. Me with the glass half full. Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm generally a happy, optimistic person, believe it or not. I do have my moments of doomer, but I can be a hopeful person. The arc of history, it depends in the justice or whatever you say that, however you say that whole thing. But yeah, there you go. All right. Anyway, that's the show today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/jeffwaldorf, or a channel member by hitting the join button below. We do need your help. Make sure, by the way, to check to see if your YouTube is on restricted mode. Okay, because it will prevent political videos from showing up on your feed. You can, I believe, still go in and search them out, but it will remove a lot of videos from your feed. And so make sure, restricted mode, turn it off, uncheck it. All right. Anyway, thanks for the show. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate that a lot. All right. Try to have a good weekend, and see you back here on Monday. Love you all, and remember, change begins with you.